So, speaking of engaged and insanely amazing, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Jim Lucio. So, Jamie Campbell suggested Jim for the theme of play, and I was automatically convinced when I started doing some background work on Jim and found this interview that he did about Artscape, where he worked as the visual arts coordinator. And one of the answers to his questions was, I want to make sure I get this right, for months, all I've been thinking about is jazzercise. And from that point on, I was convinced that this was definitely the person that play made the most sense for. So Jim's he's known online as his alter ego Defecto. And I think that he's probably best known for his work in Polaroid, so taking portraits of people with Polaroids. And I think that one thing I see as throughout that body of work is absolutely the theme of play, but also storytelling, telling the story of the individual, but also telling the story of the city, which is Baltimore, obviously. And I think also working with this idea of scarcity, that as he was working with this, Polaroids became extinct essentially, and so I think that's interesting to sort of see how that plays into his work. What else comes out is his sense of humor, his love of wigs, his love of the spectacular. And just a few positions that he's held, just a few. Just so he worked as the visual arts coordinator for Artscape. He was the gallery director for Flux Studios, the ad designer at City Paper. He was the digital designer in New York for Nickelodeon, Blue's Clues, another that's perfect. When he was here yesterday, I heard him say it in a serious way, well, I moved to New York and I knew right away all I wanted to do was work for Nickelodeon. And I was like, who says that? But that's great. I think that the idea of play is clearly intrinsic to Jim's work. It's not just part of his work. It doesn't just inform his work. It is his work. So I think that he's in a very exceptional position to talk to us about that and sort of help us better understand how we can make our work better through the idea of play. So with that, Jim, I will give it to you.
Thank you. Is this on? Hello, testing. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning. We'll just get right into it. Right off the bat, I would like to say that play is something that, and I know everyone here has probably heard this before, maybe 1,000 times, but play is something that is not just for kids. They do it really well. It's effortless. It's natural. It's built in. It's just something that they do. But I think by the age of 6, by my calculations, the drama can start seeping in. You could already see it in that guy on the end. And it could start getting a little bit more difficult. I think when we reach that stage, it's all about trying to reclaim what play was and how we can keep it in our lives. So 6, the magic number, watch out for that if you have any kids that are 5. Play should always factor into our lives. I think it's very important. It should be part of a well-balanced life that includes pain and sadness, and it's just something that really needs to be there. I believe that we are here on this earth to enjoy the time that we're here. I don't think that we need to make all the sacrifices that we sometimes do or be at the service of so many people. We need to be able to think about what we want for us. And I think a lot of people need to be reminded that we can't all be her. We don't need to bust our asses like Mother Teresa or make so many sacrifices. she did it well. We don't all have to go there. But what we do need to do, and I think this is essential to keep play in our lives, is just to be a little bit more selfish. Just a little bit. Be selfish. I like talking about selfishness. I think it's something that should be in our lives in the same way that play and all of these other things are. It has a bad rap, and it's not as bad as it sounds. Try it. When we make decisions for ourselves and we do things that matter for us, I think there's a purity in our focus and our thinking that makes our contributions much more valuable. So that little bit of selfishness, when we do that, we really are giving this gift that nobody else can give. It's as pure as we can be by offering what we have to somebody else. And that's the only way people can get what we have, is by just giving them what's coming out of us without any outside influence. So a pure gift of giving of ourselves is the result of being a little bit selfish. My roots of selfishness go way back. My dad was a young single parent, and I was often alone. Sad. No, it wasn't that bad. But that meant that I got to decide how I got to spend my time. And a lot of that time was spent in dark movie theaters. My babysitters were the Fox Theater, the El Rey Theater, which was awesome. It had these murals that were Gauguin-like with naked Polynesian women holding coconuts. It was a great place for an 8-year-old to hang out for hours and hours every weekend. I also spent a lot of time watching late night television. That is basically me. Sneaking up in the middle of the night to watch movies that were very, very inappropriate for a kid my age. But it kind of helped define what I liked and what entertained and amused me. This was an example of one of the movies that I saw when I was a kid that it affected me so much. It was the first time I saw a head get run over by a car. I think I was probably 7. And to this day, I'm still mesmerized and blown away by the fashion statements that were made in this film. It's a look that still works for me. This is called Lady in a Cage, by the way. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's awesome. So growing up, there really weren't a whole lot of kids like the Little Rascals. You think of all these kids in a neighborhood playing, and you run outside and you're going to run into your best friend. I didn't really have that. And there kind of really weren't very many adults either. So this kind of left me feeling like I wasn't sure who my role models were, so they ended up being the bad guys. I loved the bad guys. I'm sure there are a few of you out there that can identify with that. But the thing about the bad guys is they took selfishness to the extremes. They wanted to take over the world. They wanted to do lots of harm to other people. They wanted to destroy things. And that's not the kind of selfishness I'm talking about. But they did offer other things that are very valuable to me that I think I did take in and kind of incorporate into my view of what works for me. They were the most vibrant characters. They were the most determined, resourceful, and, like I mentioned before, the most fashionable and stylish. The bad guys helped me define what play was to me. I could incorporate that into something that I was doing somehow. I just knew that they worked for me. So we need to define what play means to us. And when you get beyond the basic understanding of what we think play is, and that is what we see kids doing in a schoolyard or games or sports, that kind of thing. When we get beyond that, we need to realize that we each define what that means for us. So we all have our different personalities, different experiences, and our idea of what play is might not be the same thing for the person next to you. I mean, we all have to define it for ourselves and kind of go from there. As a kid, you know, I spent a lot of time in my head, and I was a little bit of a dreamer. I understood that my playground didn't have to be what I knew that was around me. I knew and sensed that my playground could be as big as I wanted, and it could be anywhere I wanted. So because I had few restrictions, I think my childhood gave me a sense of adventure that I don't know I would have had if I grew up any differently. And it also made me confident in my decision making. I also felt that, you know, whatever I wanted to get out of life, it was up to me to do. You know, I got to figure it out, and I have to do it. So, and the overriding thing going on in my head is always, and it has to be fun. So my sense of adventure brought me to San Francisco after I graduated from high school. That's me, San Francisco, 1984 or 3. And San Francisco was a super exciting time, obviously, when you move somewhere new and you're experiencing all the stuff that's fresh, new people, new experiences. It's the way life is supposed to be, and you feel like, I'm doing it right. This is what it's all about. So this time was really awesome, but it was also an incredibly dark, sad time. They just gave a name for AIDS, and you know, a young kid moving to the city where this is happening was jarring, shocking. You couldn't walk down the street without feeling the death and destruction and sadness that is part of the daily life in San Francisco during this time. This whole generation of men died away, and these new people coming in, including myself, found that there was this cultural void that needed filling. We started clubs. We became DJs. I didn't, I just went to all these events. I went to them way too much, actually. But during this time, you know, we were able to create our own playground the way we wanted it to be. We dressed differently than the generation before us. We were a little edgier. We were a little more punk rock. I don't like to think of it as taking advantage of anything unfortunate, because it was a very terrible time, but we saw an opportunity that we used to have fun. And I mean, if we didn't, there would have been no fun, and it would have just been sadness. So that's what we did. And during this time, I co-produced a TV show, a public access TV show called Trauma TV. And this was another great example of me being selfish. So we were making Super 8 movies and videos, and we needed somewhere to show them. So we started this public access show. Suddenly we had a venue to show everything we were doing. Yay, we could show our stuff on TV now. But it also opened up opportunities for other filmmakers and artists to show their work and open up collaborative opportunities. And so that little bit of selfishness became a gift to other people who wanted to do what we were doing. And selfishness works. Play evolves. I mentioned before that, you know, we define play, what it means for us. And it also changes over time. I mean, you know that feeling when something just isn't working anymore. Is your play, does it still feel the same? Does it have the same power? Is it still relevant? Whenever you're questioning whether or not something is still working in that realm of play, or really anything, you have to stop and think, do I still want this in my life? Does it make sense? Do I need to rediscover it? What's the new thing? So you have to reevaluate, and when you feel that change is necessary, you kind of have to walk into the dark, walk the plank, and figure out what that next new thing is. In my case, during this time period, I just needed to move. I spent 9 years mostly playing in San Francisco. Some bursts of creativity. So I knew it wasn't working anymore, and so I just had to get out of there, start somewhere fresh, and make this new experience feel like it felt for me when I first moved to San Francisco. And New York did that, but it also had the opposite effect, and that is that all I did was work, with bursts of creativity and some time to travel, which satisfied my sense of play during that time period. I think it always kind of factored in, but the idea really is to try to balance it out. And I was out of balance with my work and play for many, many years. It took moving to Baltimore really to understand and feel that everything I was doing was actually working together. I'm kind of a workaholic, and all my work results in play, hopefully. I mean, I do things because I feel like I'm gonna enjoy it, it's gonna be fun. And so I moved to Baltimore, and that kind of happened. I was really, really inspired by the people. I wanted to document all these creative, awesome people that I ran into everywhere. And I started taking these portraits, which I'd been doing for many years before this, but not this many. I mean, I had it with me all the time. I had sponsors. I had a blog on the city paper, and I became the Polaroid guy, which was kind of weird. People walked up to me. I mean, my website was Defecto, and I just kind of made that word up because it sounded cool, and it sounded a little bit defective, like, you know, I felt sometimes. And people recognized me on the street. It's like, are you Defecto? So it's kind of weird. And these Polaroids kind of started all that. I took thousands of these. And I was not beneath photographing my dog in wigs. Katie mentioned my love of wigs. So you get a little taste of some of the stuff I've done. And simultaneously during this time, I started doing these club nights. I'd never thrown a party. I didn't really know anyone yet. But again, it was an example of how can I have fun? I don't really have a job yet. Actually I did, but I won't mention it. It's not the job at the city paper, that came later, but I needed to create more for myself, and I thought, well, I'll just throw a party, because I knew that, I mean, that's one of the great things about Baltimore, it offers a lot of opportunity, and I knew that the nightlife was kind of lame. Not anymore, it's awesome now. But I just saw an opportunity, and I felt like there's nowhere to do this. It's okay, so I'll make it up, and we'll throw a party, and I'll have fun putting it together. So these things are all the work that went into producing this stuff, from the photography, the design, the graphic design, the ad copy, all of the details of promotion and marketing. Every step of it was actually a blast. So I finally found myself playing while I was working. I was working to play, or playing to work. It was just the same thing. And it was brilliant. I loved it. And And then when you have your final party, that's the real play. But meanwhile, the whole entire thing has just been a blast. We did the craziest thing. We made up bands. You know, we'd sit together and come up with ideas for a band that we wanted to debut that would maybe practice once and then hype the shit out of them like they were, you know, the Beatles resurrected or something. This is Joyce DeSalvo, and her band was called the Telemarketers. And so this is me trying to be ridiculous. Who would go see a band called the Telemarketers? It sounds like, how much boring could that possibly be? But that's the direction we like to go, and it worked for us. And you know, we're laughing about it, and it's fun. We created unholy unions that you would never see anywhere else, and that was also fun. The ridiculousness kind of reached its peak when I threw a wig drive. And I mean, this is like the perfect example of wanting to be super selfish and doing something for me. Did I think that people are going to be clamoring through the doors to get into the wig drive? No. But I did want to see a bunch of people wearing wigs, drinking and watching bands. So yeah, let's throw a wig drive. And as you can see there, we were helping fight the comb over. So it was a very, very important event. So all this stuff, years of doing this and selfishly throwing these parties that thankfully other people liked, but that were really meant to entertain me and my friends who were, you know, in on it. It led to a job. Oh, well, you have to rediscover. Remember, I mentioned that before. And that's part of your change process. But it led to a job that at Artscape. I was a visual arts coordinator and creative director, curator, babysitter. I mean, the list goes on. But I went from entertaining and programming events for 50 to a couple hundred people to hundreds of thousands of people. And I mean, the great thing about this is that this was all because I was thinking about myself. Like, what do I want to do? And I think there was this pureness of what I was offering that spoke volumes. It's like, this person is going to give us something we've never seen before. And so I was hired to do this job, and it was great. And where are we for time? So, wait, let me go back. I actually just left this job, so now I'm in this transition stage where I have a new job, but I also have a new project that I'm working on. And the awesome thing about this is that I could focus on one single person, whereas these projects, I had to take into consideration all the people attending, thousands of people. I felt like I had to try to please so many different types. And I mean, that was a huge challenge. But I'm working on a new project that I can now focus back on one person. The way that I was taking my Polaroids, where it was just all about one single individual who deserves a moment. I am going to be doing events for dead people. They're called after parties. And the idea behind this really is to elevate everyday people who kind of deserve a moment, that did amazing things in their lives, and create a celebration for them and for their friends. And so, what is a celebration? It's fun, right? And what is fun? It's play. All I want to do is play. So it's come back around that way, and I'm trying to crystallize and focus on the uniqueness of one. So I'm putting this project together. If anyone wants to find out more information about that, they can go to my website or email me on Twitter, after parties. So, just to wrap up here, be selfish, not in the take over the world kind of selfish, but a little bit goes a long way. Figure out what play means to you, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, and you're the only one that can define it for yourself. When things get stale, change it up, move, quit your job, find a new girlfriend, boyfriend. I mean, you got to change. Otherwise, all you're going to be doing is complaining. And I think about these things that I call deathbed regrets, and this is all about trying to avoid that. And rediscover. I mean, it's just a process that cycles through over and over. So be a little selfish today and see what happens. Thank you.
We actually have 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, I forgot about that. How long did that last?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Jim, we can take them now. Yes.
So how do you do play for 100,000 people and be self at the same time?
Be myself.
No, in terms of thinking about their experiences, selfishness clearly.
Oh, how did I was,
I'm going to repeat the question.
okay.
He asked, how do you throw an event for thousands of people and also be selfish and maintain that? Is that?
There were lots of opportunities to do what I wanted on something this scale. Sometimes you just don't tell your superiors what you're doing, and they find out on Friday. And you run the risk of trying to explain yourself on Monday. I brought something called a mustache ride to Artscape one year, and that was one of those things that I was like, should I say something? Nah, I'm gonna do it because everybody's gonna love this, and of course they did. I came up with a lot of themes and ideas that I really liked, and then I just hope that other people can appreciate it and the artists could work with it too. So there's plenty of room there.
Yeah. Anything else?
Curious about your new endeavor, the after. Maybe just
Yeah, the after parties. I've been sitting on this idea for years, like 2 or 3 years. And it was inspired by my grandmother. Like every time I love cooking, I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. And whenever I'm making Mexican food, I just think of her. And it's just, she never really had her moment. And I see so many people, like celebrities, that are just like, why are you in the news? Who are you? And it's like, I don't, there are too many pedestals, and there are so many other people that deserve a little bit more attention than a lot of people that get it. And it's also about just calling attention to people who live like really good lives. And maybe, and this sounds a little grandiose, that, because I know how selfish people are. If somebody has one after party, everybody's gonna want one. Well, when I die, I want one. So the big idea behind this really is that, do you deserve one? And are you living your life in a way that somebody would want to throw you a party? I know it's a grand concept, but yeah, maybe it'll make people think about how they're living their lives and live a little bit better. But I'm very excited about it, and stay tuned.
Jamie.
so what is it about Baltimore that inspires you? I mean, you were in New York and San Francisco, so why Baltimore?
Did everybody hear that? Why did Baltimore inspire me? It was so uniquely its own place. When we moved here in 2002, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging kind of way because I really liked it, but it felt like it was 1987, and it was really like, wow, everybody still thinks it's 1987. This is awesome. But I knew that wasn't really the case. That's just Baltimore being itself. It had its own identity, which I really loved, and there's so many places that kind of are losing it. So I think that would be it in a nutshell.
think a lot of people have almost a sense of guilt about doing anything frivolous or playful because they look at their lives so seriously.
Right.
What would you offer in terms of advice to help people be more welcoming and more ready to embrace their playfulness?
First of all,
Do you want to repeat the question?
how can, just think about her for a second. The question was, people have a tendency to think too seriously and basically undervalue play like it's too frivolous. And what would be my advice to people to not be that way? Like when I brought Mother Teresa up, really it's how can you do that? I mean, I know some people, that's just the way they are. They need to feel like they have to do so much for everyone else. And that's fine as long as you don't complain about it afterwards. Why do it if you're going to complain about it? I think maybe that would be the thing. It's like, are you doing it for yourself or are you doing it for somebody else? And are you doing it for the right reasons? And what's wrong with play? It benefits everyone. You know, when you're a little bit you can't have just all the drama and stuff that keeps you up worried at night in your life. I mean, that's not what life's about. I think that they just need to understand that it's part of what creates the balance. And, you know, that deathbed thing. It's like, why didn't I have more fun in my life? Anyone else?
Anyone else? That's it. All right. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you.